name is Hanani, and today I will be explaining about risk management. But first, we all need to know what is the definition of risk. In our daily lives, we have always faced risk, and I think we all have a general understanding of what is risk. Risk is defined as the likelihood of an occurrence of a hazardous event with specified period or circumstances, and the severity of a injury or damage to people, property, environment, and others. So if we could put it into an equation, risk is defined like this. Risk is equal to likelihood times by severity. In order to control risk, we must have risk management. Risk management is the total of 4 procedures. The first one being identifying a hazard that has been detected. Second one, assessing the risk of said hazard. The third one being putting in place control for the hazard. And the fourth procedure is reviewing the outcomes of the plan.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and hello to everyone that is watching. My name is Muhammad Farhan, student of Uitm Jengka, Pahang, and I'm currently studying for my diploma in science. Okay, so today I'm going to explain to you all about HIRAC. What is HIRAC? It's basically a short form for hazard identification, risk assessment, and also risk control, HIRARC. Okay, so what is HIRAC? HIRAC is basically a basic of risk management for an organization or business. So basically all the companies that you know in Malaysia or anywhere in the world use this thing, which is HIRAC, to make sure that their working environment is safer for their workers or employees. Okay, so what is the purpose of HIRAC? Okay, so the purpose of HIRAC, there is 3, which is to identify all the factors that may cause harm to employees and also others, which is known as the hazards. Also, the second one is to consider what the chances are that a harmful situation or circumstances and the severity that can come from the hazard, which is the risk. Okay, so the third one is to enable the employers to plan, introduce, and monitor preventive measures to ensure that the risks are adequately controlled at all times. There are 4 processes of HIRAC for every company, which is the first one is to classify work activities. The second one is to identify the hazard. The third one is to assess the risk of each hazard, and the fourth one is to make risk control measures. Okay, I will be explaining about 2 of them, which is to classify work activities and also the assessment of risk. Okay, so classifying work activities is important because not all places have the same type of risk and hazard. So for example, if you're working in a company, for example, let's say Tesla, and you work in the vehicle assembly line, the hazard and the risk that exists in that vehicle assembly line is different from if you work in the office. So that's why it is important to classify the work activities. So for example, among some of the classification are if you work indoors or outdoors, or you work with big things such as cars, lorries, or small things which is like car engine. So yeah, that's for classifying work activities. For risk assessments is basically we assess how much severity of a hazard can bring. So for example, if it's a 1, it will be a low risk, which means it would not bring too much harm, but it still would be good to make sure that it's kept in check. Okay, so there are 3 relative risk value, which is obviously high, medium, and low. For high, we need to make immediate action to control the hazard, and all action must be taken and documented in a risk assessment form. Okay, so that's for high. For medium, it will require a planned approach in controlling the hazard and also apply a temporary measure if needed. Also, for medium, the actions taken must be documented and written in the risk assessment form too. for low risk, it can be considered as acceptable and no further action or measures would be needed. Although it is recommended for the risk to be resolved quickly and efficiently, and everything also have to be like the high risk and also the medium risk. It needs to be documented and written in the risk assessment form. So that's all from me today. My teammates would explain to you guys more about the identification of hazard and also the risk control measures. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone who's still enjoying this video. First of all, I want to introduce myself. Alright, my name is Muhammad Zulmi bin Zaidi. I am still studying at University Teknologi Mara Pahang Kampus Jengka. The purpose that I want to talk to all of you is that I want to share what one of the hierarchy process, because this issue is related to the lab safety. Right? So let's jump in. So about hazard. Alright, hazard is something that can cause you harm and damage to the lab properties. Alright, so I will categorize into two types of hazard. First is safety hazard. The safety hazard means that a force that's strong enough to hurt you or damage the properties actually in the lab. Alright, example, fire hazard. In lab, there's some substance that highly flammable. It can ignite fire very quickly, it can burn all the properties very quickly, and of course, it can burn you. So, we jump to the second type of hazard, the environmental hazard. Right? So, what is an environmental hazard? An environmental hazard is released to the environment that can cause you harm, and it can damage to your body in slowly process. Like example, you handle a thermometer in the lab and suddenly you slip the thermometer and broke it. Alright? Actually, you know, thermometer was installed with a mercury inside of them. Those substances is very dangerous when you expose it to the air because it can damage to your cell body actually, but the process may be slow. So what happens if the thermometer broke? So of course, the lab system will shut down the lab to prevent all the people to get in. Then the lab system, he or she, will call the firefighters to handle them. Alright, the techniques that you can apply to identify the hazard is first aid record and the injury records. Alright, this type of record can track about the injuries that happen in lab, maybe past few days. Alright, like what type the injury, how the injury happened, how badly the injury are. So secondly is that the substances record. I mean the chemical substance record that have been listed by lab system. Alright, this list can prevent you from taking a wrong step in handling the substances, because in lab not all of the substances are safe. I think that's it from me. So my advice is that when you are in the lab, the hazards are waiting for you. That's it from me. Have a good day and stay safe.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nadina binti Mahfuz. So I'm going to talk about risk control. Okay, so what is control? Control is eliminate and inactivate hazard in order to stop a risk from occur to workers that enter into the work area. In choosing a suitable controls, we need to involve three things. Okay, first is evaluate and select short-term and long-term controls. The second is implement short-term controls to protect workers until permanent controls is put into places. And lastly, implement long-term control when reasonably practicable. So do you know that we have a type of controls? First is at the source of hazard. Second is engineering control. What is at the source of hazardous? Okay, in this type of control, we have two things, which is elimination and substitution. Elimination is when we stop all the job that can cause the hazardous. Okay, we eliminate the job because we want to stop the hazardous from occur. Okay, Secondly is substitution. Substitution is we substitute a hazardous equipment into less hazardous equipment. For engineering controls, we have 6 aspects, which is redesign, isolation, automation, barriers, absorption, and lastly is dilution. It means that we redesigned the work equipment to become less hazardous. Okay, for example that I can give, a huge and heavy container, we redesign it, it becomes small and easy to use, or easy to lift up and not so heavy, so it will becomes less hazardous to our workers. Lastly in risk control is personal protective equipment, which is PPE. What is PPE? Okay, PPE is an equipment that we wear, something like a clothes, a safety clothes that we use in a hazardous work area. Usually the PPE is to prevent us from getting troubles or from getting any risks from hazardous things. Okay, like a recent example that I can give is during this COVID-19, all the frontliners using PPE in order to prevent them from getting COVID-19 virus from a patient that have the virus itself. So that's all from me. Thank you.
So Assalamualaikum, my name is Nur Husna Atira binti Adnam. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the accident record part. So first of all, what is accident record? So accident record is a task that you need to identify any hazard that identified in the workplace that can be done through the effective process. So next, ultimately the individual or team who identify this hazard must ensure a proper communication of the hazard to the appropriate workplace authority. So it is depend on at your workplace, either it is a manager, a department head, or designated person. So each hierarchy must be fully documented, and also the hierarchy must be complete by the hierarchy team, which is your team members, and signed by the in-charge personnel of the area. So you guys need to list down all the hierarchy that or all the hazard that occur in your workplace, or you need to identify all of them, and this will be signed and approved by the in-charge personnel. So department will be responsible for the hazard, and their control are required to maintain all of this record for assessment at least for 3 years. So next, the appropriate authority, whether this is a manager or other assigned person, they are responsible for ensuring that effective and timely control are applied to the hazard and communicating the result back to the originator. So the management or employer must endorse the approve of the hierarchy result. Employer must communicate all hierarchy to employees, monitor the follow-up action, and keep the record. It is for your safety. Okay, so next we move on to the documenting process. The first one is you need to complete the hierarchy form. So I'm going to attach the example of hierarchy form letter. So it is recommended to use every single form for each work process. Second, record the names and designated of hierarchy team members. It is a very, very important part, okay, so you need to do. So the third one is outline the process workflow and indicate them in the form under a process or location column. The fourth one is list all the activities, whether it is routine or non-routine, for each work process under the work activity column. The fifth one is identify the hazard associated with each activity and record it in hazard column. The sixth, I guess, determine the effect of each hazard identified and record in effect column, and record any existing hazard control measure. So we move on to the eighth step, which is you need to determine the likelihood, which is L, from the table A, and severity, which is S, from table B for each hazard. Assign P and C rating in the respectively column. The existing control measure should be taken into consideration while determine L and S. So the next one is by using risk metric, which is table C and D. Assign one risk and record in risk column. Next, based on the risk assigned, recommend appropriate risk control measure in the table D, and assign a suitable person to implement the recommended risk control and indicate the follow-up action data and status. So you need to repeat the hierarchy for other activities process. Conduct another round of hierarchy after control measure has been implemented. And last one, review hierarchy for every 3 years or whenever 3 whenever there are change in process of activity. And this is an important process for you need to do in order to reduce the risk when you are handling any work in your workplace. To do the serial record for your safety, okay?